Okay, so this is how I would revise the paragraph that we looked at last class period. So I'll read it for you as it is now, and then I will make the edits, and you can follow along. So here is the paragraph of summary that we were working on last class period. I am going to make some revisions to it, and I'll kind of talk you through it so that you know why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. When possible, I'll draw attention as well to the requirements of the midterm exam. So the first sentence, the article Losing Face, How Facebook Disconnects Us is mainly about how social networking sites like Facebook affects human interaction with each other. So a couple things I notice about this. First of all, the author isn't mentioned in the first sentence. The title is, which is good. You should definitely always introduce the title and the author. So I probably might want to correct that. I also noticed this is mainly. Mainly is usually a word that is kind of fluff. It doesn't really need to be there, right? So the other thing that I find confusing is affects human interaction with each other. So it's in general confusing to me because I'm not sure how human interaction and human interaction happens, how they affect each other, how interaction affects interaction. So there seems to be a little bit of confusion there. And the final thing is this S. We're actually talking about sites, right? So how social networking sites affect human interaction instead of how sites affects human interaction. This is a problem of number, right? So we have a plural subject, sites, and that means that we need a verb that fits with that subject. So a plural subject uses affect rather than affects. Okay? All right, so this is what I would do. In the article, Losing Face, How Facebook Disconnects Us, make these capital simply because that's the convention in MLA formatting. I would get rid of the is. Okay. In the article, Losing Face, How Facebook Disconnects Us, I would want to make something clear here about where it came from, right? Published recently in Counseling Today. Then who's the author? Jennifer L. Klein. Doesn't talk mainly about how, but I would say she discusses how social networking sites like Facebook, and here's where I would just want to be a little bit more clear, a little bit more precise with my word choice. How social networking sites like Facebook create barriers to real human interaction. So if you notice, what I'm doing is kind of reading ahead and drawing on this word here that I think is really good, okay, uh, to make my first sentence more fleshed out. Now, this feels a little bit awkward, right? It feels a little bit repetitive, okay? So I would probably just cut that because it basically incorporated it into the original, okay? Let's see. Klein states that there will be interpersonal awkwardness if young adults do not practice communicating face to face. Okay, we discussed the slight confusion that occurs with this sentence last class period. I probably want to add something just to kind of set things up a little bit more clearly. Okay, while tools like Facebook claim to connect people, comma, Klein argues that they actually keep us from communicating face to face. Now I'll use that quote that was incorporated, which often creates a sense of interpersonal awkwardness. Now I need to cite this, okay, because it is a direct quote, and I will cite it parenthetically using the paragraph number. So what this sentence also does is it sets up the purpose of her argument, okay? She's working to question, basically, a kind of received opinion about Facebook and about social networking sites, the idea that they connect us, right? Okay. So now there's this bit here about practicing communicating face to face, which I really like. I wonder if I can kind of make it in to this somewhere, if I can keep this language in here somewhere. But let's cut this paragraph sentence for just a moment, and we can kind of return to it if we need to. Okay. Okay. So if all right. Similarly, the author also mentioned that if young adults continue to spend on social networking sites, they will have a hard time reaching out for help and expressing themselves. Okay, this is a great paraphrase. I love this citing of the paraphrase. Excellent. Okay, that's definitely something you should do. Okay. What I'm not so keen on here is this extra use of similarly, which I also note we have an although, and then we have an as a result here. Okay. So it seems like what this author is doing is using transitional phrases, transitional words to kind of connect ideas, but really the way they read here is as disconnected in fact. Okay. Because I don't really know how this is similar to this, or how this is although, or how this is a result of this. Okay, so you might consider toning down your use of transitional words. Okay, especially if they don't fit clearly with the logic of your paragraph. Okay, if they're used in a kind of an artificial way, right? As here's a transitional word that I need to put in because I need to make a transition, rather than thinking about how the ideas fit together. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, the other thing that I'm noticing in student writing is the word mention. A lot of people use it, and I would suggest, being a little bit careful about that because it injects a kind of colloquial tone that doesn't really work with formal writing. Okay, so the author also mentioned that. Okay, I would probably just start with the if. Okay, if young adults continue to depend on social networking sites for human interaction, I might clarify for what? What would they be defending it? Depending on it for? Comma. They will have a hard time reaching out for help and expressing themselves. Great. Okay, I think that's perfect. Notice that I'm using the present tense. Okay, they will have a hard time if they continue to depend while tools claim to connect people. Okay, while tools claim to connect people. You use the present tense when you're writing a summary because the idea is that each time you read the essay, it's happening again. Okay? And your job is to summarize it as it was written. So you're basically just condensing it. Okay? So usually the text that you're condensing will be using the present tense also if you take a look. So just as a general rule of thumb, always use the present tense when you are writing a summary. Okay, now on to the next sentence. Although, comma, okay, usually you don't put a comma here because the comma there doesn't work in the same way it does after similarly. Okay, you would actually put the comma here, right, where it actually is. Okay, so I would just cut that comma. Although SNS is more accessible and convenient to communicate, comma, Klein argues how blah 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 blah. Okay, if you put the comma here, what you're saying is essentially although SNS is more accessible and convenient to communicate, Klein argues how. Okay? So we don't need that there. I would cut that. Now, make sure that you're spelling all this out. Social networking sites is more accessible and convenient to communicate. Okay, that's a little bit imprecise. I would probably revise it in a way to just kind of clarify. Okay, all those social networking sites offer accessible. I got that actually. Offer. Notice I'm getting rid of the is here as well. Offer accessible and convenient ways to communicate, comma, Klein points out. I would say points out here because this is just a part of her argument. Okay. Klein points out. Okay, what is she pointing out? So here we have a fundamental kind of confusion, right? How social media is more like online muscles that deprives users, another subject, verb, agreement issue, from who they truly are. Okay, I think this just needs to be rendered a little bit more precise. Okay, Klein points out. What is she pointing out? That they deprive users of fundamental human qualities like empathy, comma, which can result in, okay, good, now we move on to the online muscles, right? But I would actually just paraphrase this because it's a little bit confusing. What do online muscles mean, right? So I would explain what it means. Qualities like empathy, comma, which can result in aggressive online behavior like bullying or stalking. Okay. And now we'll keep this paraphrase because that's what we're doing. Okay. Um, in paragraph 18. Okay, great. And now, as a result, this suggests, when you say as a result, it suggests that what we're going to get here, okay, this next part is actually a result of this, okay, and that's not quite true, is it? Right? A Trojan horse isn't a result of depriving fundamental qualities like empathy, right? So I would, but this is a good way to conclude. Okay, so I would use a transitional word phrase here. That suggests the conclusion, okay, in a more kind of broad way, right? So ultimately, for her, Klein, we don't need Klein here because we've used it earlier, okay? Klein, ultimately for her, let's see, social networking sites are like, like the Trojan horse, comma, or dash. I would put a dash just because I like dashes, right? Like the Trojan or like the Trojan horse. Now I'm going to define it, right? They seduce like this, but notice what I'm doing is using a little bit more active language instead of they get seduced by. Okay, I would say they seduce, seduce users. Okay, with their convenience. What are they seducing them with? Right, with their convenience. But, and I like this use of in the meantime, right? So I'm going to keep that. But in the meantime, comma, damage here. So instead of be damaging, remember the verbing that we talked about, right? In the meantime, damage their communication skills. Perfect. There you go. And that's how I would revise it. So in the article, Losing Face, How Facebook Disconnects Us, published recently in Counseling Today, Jennifer Klein discusses how social networking sites like Facebook create barriers to real human interaction. While tools like Facebook claim to connect people, Klein argues that they actually keep us from communicating face to face, which often creates a sense of interpersonal awkwardness. If young adults continue to depend on social networking sites for human interaction, he suggests, they will have a hard time reaching out for help and expressing themselves. Although social networking sites offer accessible and convenient ways to communicate, comma, Klein points out that they deprive users of fundamental human qualities like empathy, which can result in aggressive online behavior like bullying or stalking. Ultimately, for her, social networking sites are like the Trojan horse. They seduce users with their convenience, but in the meantime damage their communication skills. Period. Okay, great. Now this keeps the door open for later development of some of these ideas. So that's something to keep in mind. And it generally is accurate. Okay, great. Thanks.